My name is Rebecca Sterling, and I'm 32 years old. As I stand in my walk-in closet, holding a piece of ivory cardstock that arrived 3 weeks ago, I can feel my hands trembling with a mixture of rage and determination that I haven't felt since my divorce was finalized 18 months ago. The invitation is elegant, expensive, everything my younger sister Charlotte has always demanded from life. Mr. and Mrs. Harrison Blackwell request the honor of your presence at the marriage of their daughter, Charlotte Elizabeth, to Mr. James Mitchell Worthington III. The date is set for next Saturday at the Blackwell family estate in the Hamptons, and I know this wedding will cost more than most people's houses. But it's not the invitation itself that has me standing here at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday night, staring at the gown that hangs in the corner of my closet like a beautiful ghost. It's the phone call I received from my mother yesterday, her voice dripping with that particular brand of passive-aggressive sweetness she's perfected over the years. "Rebecca, darling," she had said, "I know you'll want to look appropriate for Charlotte's special day. Nothing too flashy, you understand. We don't want you drawing attention away from the bride. Something simple would be perfect." Simple. The word echoed in my mind as I hung up the phone, and I found myself laughing, actually laughing, for the first time in months, because hanging in my closet is the most beautiful dress I've ever owned, a stunning creation that cost me more than my car payment. It's the same dress I wore to celebrate my divorce becoming final, the same dress I wore when I finally freed myself from a marriage that nearly destroyed me. And tomorrow, I'm going to wear it to Charlotte's wedding. If you're watching this story unfold, I hope you'll stick around to see where this goes. Please hit that like button and subscribe. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. The dress is a masterpiece of midnight blue silk cut to perfection, with intricate beadwork that catches the light like captured stars. It's elegant, sophisticated, and anything but simple. It's a dress that commands attention, demands respect, and tells the world that the woman wearing it is someone to be reckoned with. I bought it after my ex-husband Richard tried to take everything from me in our divorce proceedings. While he was busy hiding assets and lying to our attorneys, I was discovering my own strength. The day the judge granted me half of everything Richard thought he could keep, I walked straight to Bergdorf Goodman and bought this dress. It was my declaration of independence, my middle finger to everyone who thought I'd go quietly into the night. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand why wearing this dress to Charlotte's wedding is the perfect choice, you need to understand my family. You need to understand the Blackwells and how they turned manipulation into an art form. The golden child and the scapegoat. Growing up as a Blackwell meant living by rules that were never explicitly stated but always brutally enforced. My parents, Harrison and Patricia Blackwell, built their lives around appearances, social status, and the careful cultivation of their image within New York's elite circles. Money wasn't just power in our family. It was identity, worth, and love, all rolled into one perfectly manicured package. Charlotte, born 3 years after me, was their golden child from the moment she drew her first breath. While I struggled with my father's impossible expectations and my mother's constant criticism, Charlotte seemed to float through life effortlessly. She was prettier, they said, more charming, more socially graceful. She had that special quality that would marry well and bring honor to the family name. I remember being 8 years old, standing in our mother's dressing room as she prepared for one of their countless charity galas. Charlotte, only 5, was perched on a silk ottoman, watching Patricia apply lipstick with the reverence of someone witnessing art being created. "Rebecca, stop slouching," Mother had snapped without even looking at me. "A lady carries herself with dignity. Look at your sister. See how naturally she sits. She's going to break hearts someday. Even then, I understood the subtext. Charlotte would break hearts because she was beautiful and worthy of love. I would need to work twice as hard for half the recognition, and even then, I'd probably fall short of their expectations. The pattern continued throughout our childhood. When Charlotte made B's in school, it was because she was well-rounded and socially intelligent. When I made A's, it was because I was trying too hard and needed to develop better social skills. When Charlotte dated the captain of the lacrosse team, it was a sign of her excellent judgment in men. When I dated the class valedictorian, it was because I was settling for someone safe instead of reaching for someone with real social prospects. High school graduation was a perfect example of our family dynamics. I graduated summa cum laude, had been accepted to Columbia with a partial scholarship, and had won several academic awards. Charlotte graduated with a C+ average and had been accepted to a small private college in Connecticut that specialized in art history and had one of the highest trust fund-to-student ratios in the country. Our graduation party was held at the country club with over 200 guests in attendance. I spent the evening listening to relatives and family friends congratulate my parents on Charlotte's bright future while mentioning my achievements only in passing, if at all. Patricia, you must be so proud of Charlotte, I overheard Mrs. Winterbottom telling my mother. She has such grace, such natural elegance. She'll make someone very happy someday. Thank you, Helen. We've always known Charlotte was special. She has that quality you can't teach. She lights up a room. And Rebecca is quite accomplished academically, Mrs. Winterbottom had added politely. Yes, well, Rebecca has always been our little scholar, Mother replied with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. We're hoping college will help her develop some social polish to go with all those books. That night, I made a promise to myself that I would prove them wrong. I would build a life so successful, so impressive, that they would have no choice but to acknowledge my worth. I would marry well, excel in my career, and show them that the daughter they overlooked was actually the one who deserved their pride. It took me 14 years and a devastating divorce to realize that their approval was never going to come, no matter what I achieved. By then, I had already wasted too much of my life trying to earn love that was never going to be freely given. But I'm getting ahead of myself again. First, you need to understand what those 14 years cost me, and how I almost lost myself completely in the pursuit of their impossible standards. The marriage that almost destroyed me. I met Richard Sterling during my second year at Columbia Law School. He was everything my parents had ever dreamed of in a son-in-law. Old money, impeccable bloodline, family connections that opened doors throughout Manhattan's most exclusive circles. His father owned one of the city's most prestigious investment firms. His mother served on the boards of half a dozen major charities, and he possessed the kind of effortless confidence that comes from never having to doubt your place in the world. Richard was also charming, devastatingly handsome, and initially seemed genuinely interested in my mind as well as my appearance. Our first date lasted 6 hours, during which we discussed everything from constitutional law to Russian literature. He sent flowers the next day with a note that quoted Tolstoy. I was completely smitten. My parents were over the moon when I brought him home for dinner 3 months later. I watched my father's face light up as Richard discussed market strategies and spoke knowledgeably about the country club's golf course renovations. My mother practically glowed as she listened to him describe his family's summer house in Martha's Vineyard and their annual ski trips to Aspen. After dinner, as Richard helped me carry dishes to the kitchen, I overheard my parents talking in the dining room. Finally, my mother said, her voice filled with relief. I was beginning to worry that Rebecca would never attract the right kind of man. Sterling's a good family, my father agreed. Old money, solid reputation. This could be exactly what Rebecca needs to establish herself properly. For the first time in my life, I felt like I had won their approval. The daughter who had always been too bookish, too serious, too lacking in natural charm, had finally done something right. I had landed the golden boy, and my parents were proud. The engagement party was a spectacular affair at the Plaza Hotel with over 300 guests. I wore a cream-colored Vera Wang dress that my mother selected, and I felt like a princess as Richard slipped a 5-carat diamond ring onto my finger. The society pages covered our engagement with glowing articles about the union of two distinguished families. Our wedding was even more elaborate, a celebration at the Metropolitan Museum of Art that cost more than many people's annual salaries. I walked down the aisle in a custom Monique Lhuillier gown, surrounded by flowers that had been flown in from 3 different countries. As I said my vows, looking into Richard's eyes, I believed I was living a fairy tale. The first cracks in the facade appeared during our honeymoon in Tuscany. Richard, who had been attentive and romantic throughout our courtship, suddenly seemed impatient with my desire to visit museums and explore local culture. He preferred to spend our days at the resort's pool, networking with other wealthy Americans, discussing business deals and investment opportunities. "Becca, you're being too intense," he said when I suggested we visit a nearby medieval town. "We're supposed to be relaxing, not racing around like tourists." It was the first time anyone had ever called me too intense for wanting to learn and explore, but I dismissed it as honeymoon nerves. Richard was probably just exhausted from the wedding stress and work pressure. The pattern continued after we returned to New York. Richard's interest in my legal career began to wane as soon as I started working at a top-tier firm. Initially, he had been supportive, even proud of my professional ambitions. But as my workload increased and I began taking on high-profile cases, his attitude shifted. "Do you really need to work these long hours?" he asked one evening as I prepared to return to the office after dinner. My mother never worked a day in her life, and she managed to contribute plenty to society through her charitable work. "This case is important, Richard. I'm representing a group of women who were sexually harassed by their supervisor. Their careers were destroyed because they spoke up." That's very noble, but you're missing the Worthington's anniversary party, and Patricia specifically asked for us to be there. Your career ambitions shouldn't come at the expense of our social obligations." Our social obligations. Even then, I should have recognized the warning signs. Richard didn't see my work as meaningful or important. He saw it as an inconvenience that interfered with his vision of what our marriage should look like. The emotional manipulation started slowly, so gradually that I didn't recognize it for what it was. Richard began questioning my judgment, undermining my confidence, making me doubt my own perceptions. When I won a major case that made the front page of the legal section, he congratulated me, but then spent the evening pointing out how the victory might be perceived negatively by some people. "You know how some men feel threatened by successful women," he said. "I'm not like that, of course, but you might want to be careful about coming across as too aggressive in your next case." The instruction that broke the camel's back. 3 weeks ago, Charlotte's wedding invitation arrived with the usual Blackwell fanfare, expensive cardstock, calligraphy that probably cost more than most people's weekly grocery budget, and that particular scent of exclusivity that seems to cling to everything my family touches. I should have been happy for her. After all, James Worthington III is exactly the kind of man our parents always dreamed their daughters would marry. Harvard MBA, trust fund, family name that opens doors from Manhattan to Martha's Vineyard. But I wasn't happy. I was tired. Bone deep, soul-crushing tired of playing the role of the supportive older sister who always smiled politely while Charlotte got everything I had once desperately wanted. The phone call came on a Tuesday afternoon while I was reviewing contracts at my new law firm. I had finally left the prestigious but soul-crushing corporate firm where Richard had wanted me to stay, and was now working for a boutique practice that specialized in women's rights cases. The work was meaningful, but it paid significantly less than my previous position, a fact that my family never let me forget. "Rebecca, darling." My mother's voice had that particular tone that I'd learned to recognize as danger wrapped in silk. "I wanted to talk to you about Charlotte's wedding. We're all so excited, and we want everything to be absolutely perfect." "Of course, Mother. I'm looking forward to it." "I'm sure you are, dear. Now, I know you'll want to look appropriate for such an important occasion. Charlotte is going to be absolutely radiant, and we want to make sure nothing detracts from her special moment." There it was, the subtle implication that my mere presence might somehow diminish Charlotte's shine. I had heard variations of this speech my entire life, but something about hearing it now after everything I'd been through made my jaw clench. "What exactly are you suggesting, Mother?" "Oh, nothing dramatic, darling. Just that perhaps you might choose something simple for the occasion. Understated. You know how you sometimes have a tendency to try a bit too hard with your fashion choices. Try too hard." The words hit me like a physical blow. This from the woman who had spent my entire childhood criticizing my appearance, telling me I needed to put more effort into my looks if I ever wanted to attract the right kind of husband. "I'm not sure I understand. Are you asking me to dress down for Charlotte's wedding?" "Not dress down, sweetheart. Just appropriately. Something that won't compete with the bride. Perhaps that nice navy dress you wore to Easter dinner? Simple, elegant, appropriate for your age and situation." My age and situation. At 32, apparently, I was too old and too divorced to wear anything that might be considered beautiful or attention-getting. I was expected to fade into the background like a piece of tasteful furniture. "I'll take your suggestion under consideration," I said, my voice carefully controlled. "Wonderful. I knew you'd understand. We're all just so happy that you're in a better place now, after everything with Richard. This wedding will be a fresh start for all of us, a chance to celebrate new beginnings." After I hung up, I sat in my office for 20 minutes, staring at the wall and processing what had just happened. My mother had essentially asked me to make myself invisible at my own sister's wedding. Not because I had a history of inappropriate behavior or attention-seeking stunts, but because my presence as a successful, attractive, divorced woman might somehow steal focus from the golden child's perfect day. That evening, I found myself standing in front of my closet, looking at the dress I had worn to my divorce celebration. It hung there like a beautiful secret, a reminder of the woman I had discovered I could be when I stopped trying to meet everyone else's expectations. The dress is a masterpiece, midnight blue silk that flows like water, with intricate beadwork that catches light like captured stars. It has a high neckline that's elegant rather than revealing, sleeves that cover my arms completely, and a hemline that falls just below my knees. By any objective standard, it's tasteful, sophisticated, and appropriate for a formal wedding. It's also the most beautiful thing I've ever owned, and I have never felt more confident or more authentically myself than I did the night I wore it to celebrate my freedom. As I stood there, holding the dress against my body and looking at my reflection, I made a decision that felt like stepping off a cliff and growing wings at the same time. I was going to wear this dress to Charlotte's wedding, not because I wanted to upstage her or cause drama, but because I was done making myself smaller to accommodate other people's insecurities. I was done pretending that my worth was determined by my ability to fade into the background. If my family wanted simple, they were about to discover that sometimes the simplest choice is to finally tell the truth, the preparation and the plan. The week leading up to Charlotte's wedding felt like preparing for battle, though I suppose in many ways that's exactly what I was doing. Every morning, I would wake up and look at the dress hanging in my closet and feel that same mixture of terror and exhilaration that I imagine skydivers must experience before jumping out of perfectly good airplanes. I had made my decision, but that didn't mean I was blind to the potential consequences. Wearing this particular dress to this particular event was going to send a message that my family would not appreciate. It was going to create drama at what was supposed to be Charlotte's perfect day, and it was going to force conversations that had been avoided for decades. But I was tired of avoiding those conversations. I was tired of pretending that everything was fine, that our family dynamics were normal, that I was okay with being treated like a supporting character in everyone else's story. My best friend Sarah called me Wednesday evening, ostensibly to check on my wedding preparations, but really to perform what I recognized as an intervention. "Becca, honey, I'm worried about you. You've been different since Charlotte's engagement party. I don't know, more angry than I've seen you since the divorce." Sarah was one of the few people who had witnessed the full extent of my marriage's implosion, and she knew better than anyone how much work I'd done to rebuild myself afterward. We were sitting in my apartment sharing a bottle of wine and Chinese takeout when she decided to address the elephant in the room. "You're planning something, aren't you? You have that look you get when you're about to do something dramatic." "Define dramatic," I said, taking a sip of wine. "Rebecca Eleanor Blackwell, do not make me guess. What are you plotting?" I told her about the dress, about my mother's phone call, about the decision I'd made. Sarah listened without interrupting, her expression cycling through surprise, concern, and what might have been admiration. "Becca, I love you, and I love that you're finally standing up for yourself. But are you sure this is the hill you want to die on? It's Charlotte's wedding day." "That's exactly why this is the right time," I said, "because it's Charlotte's wedding day, and they still felt comfortable telling me to make myself invisible. Because even on what should be a day of celebration and family unity, they can't resist putting me in my place. But what if this backfires? What if they cut you off completely?" The question hung in the air between us, and I realized I'd been asking myself the same thing all week. What if my parents decided I was too much trouble, too disruptive to their carefully maintained family image? What if Charlotte never forgave me for taking attention away from her special day? What if I ended up completely alone? "Then I'll know where I stand," I said finally. "Sarah, I've spent 32 years trying to earn love that was never going to be freely given. I've made myself smaller, quieter, more convenient, and it's never been enough. If standing up for myself once costs me their approval, then their approval was never real to begin with. And if it costs you Charlotte?" That question was harder to answer. Despite everything, I did love my sister. I loved the little girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, who begged me to read her stories, who looked up to me before she learned that I was supposed to be the disappointing daughter. I loved the woman she could have been if our parents hadn't taught her that love was a zero-sum game. If Charlotte can't understand why I'm doing this, then maybe we were never as close as I thought we were. Thursday afternoon, I made an appointment at my favorite salon for a full treatment. Hair, makeup, nails, the works. If I was going to make a statement, I wanted to look absolutely perfect doing it. As my stylist worked on my hair, I found myself thinking about all the times I'd prepared for family events by trying to make myself less noticeable, more palatable, easier to overlook. "You seem different today," Marcus, my hairstylist, observed as he worked. "More determined. What's the occasion?" "My sister's wedding." "And you're planning to steal the show?" "I'm planning to show up as myself for once." Marcus paused in his work and looked at me through the mirror. "Honey, I've been doing your hair for 3 years, and this is the first time I've seen you look genuinely excited about a family event. Whatever you're planning, I'm here for it." Friday night, I tried on the dress one final time. It fit perfectly, as I knew it would. The deep blue brought out my eyes, the cut flattered my figure, and the beadwork caught the light from my bedroom lamp like scattered diamonds. I looked elegant, sophisticated, and powerful. I also looked like a woman who was done apologizing for taking up space in the world. As I hung the dress back in my closet, I thought about the last time I'd worn it, the night my divorce was finalized. I had been scared then, uncertain about my future, devastated by the collapse of the life I'd thought I wanted. But I had also been free for the first time in years, liberated from the crushing weight of trying to be someone I wasn't. Tomorrow, I would put on this dress again, and I would walk into my sister's wedding as the woman I had fought so hard to become. Whatever happened next, I would face it standing tall, looking beautiful, and refusing to apologize for either. The arrival that stopped conversations. Saturday morning dawned crisp and clear, the kind of perfect October day that seems designed for outdoor weddings in the Hamptons. I woke up early, despite having barely slept, and spent an hour on my yoga mat trying to center myself for what I knew would be a challenging day. As I moved through my practice, I kept reminding myself of the mantra I developed during my divorce proceedings. I am worthy of respect, I deserve to take up space, and I will not make myself smaller for anyone else's comfort. The Blackwell estate was a 40-minute drive from my Manhattan apartment, and I had deliberately timed my arrival for exactly when the ceremony was scheduled to begin. I wanted to make an entrance, yes, but I wasn't cruel enough to disrupt the actual wedding vows. Charlotte deserved to have her moment, even if our family dynamics were about to shift dramatically afterward. As I drove through the familiar gates of my childhood home, I felt a complex mixture of emotions wash over me. The sprawling estate looked exactly as it had throughout my youth. Perfectly manicured grounds, the grand colonial mansion standing proud against the backdrop of ancient oak trees, everything designed to convey old money elegance and understated power. I could see the wedding setup from the circular driveway, white chairs arranged in perfect rows on the south lawn, an elaborate floral arch that probably cost more than most people's cars, and what appeared to be half of New York's social elite already seated and waiting for the ceremony to begin. I parked next to a familiar Bentley that belonged to my great-aunt Millicent, took a deep breath, and checked my appearance one final time in the rearview mirror. My hair was perfect, my makeup was flawless, and the dress looked even more stunning in natural light than it had under my bedroom lamps. As I walked across the gravel driveway, my heels clicking against the stones, I noticed the first few heads turning in my direction. The ceremony hadn't started yet, but most of the guests were already seated, engaged in the kind of polite pre-wedding chatter that characterizes high society gatherings. Mrs. Worthington, James's mother, was the first to notice my approach. I watched her expression change from polite acknowledgement to surprise to something that looked suspiciously like approval. She leaned over to whisper something to her husband, who turned to look at me with raised eyebrows. I had almost reached the seating area when I heard my mother's voice behind me. "Rebecca!" The single word carried enough weight to stop me in my tracks. I turned to see Patricia Blackwell approaching, resplendent in champagne-colored silk that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Her expression was carefully controlled, but I could see the tension in her shoulders, the slight tightening around her eyes that indicated she was not pleased. "Mother," I said, keeping my voice steady and pleasant, "you look beautiful. The wedding setup is absolutely stunning." "Thank you, darling." Her eyes traveled over my dress, and I watched her face cycle through several emotions: surprise, recognition, and what might have been panic. "That's an interesting choice for today. I thought it was appropriate, elegant, tasteful, suitable for a formal wedding." We stood there for a moment, engaged in the kind of silent communication that only family members can master. She knew exactly what I was doing, and I knew that she knew. The question was whether she would address it directly or continue the charade of polite conversation. "Perhaps we should find you a seat," she said finally. "The ceremony is about to begin." As we walked toward the seating area, I became aware of the ripple effect my presence was creating. Conversations quieted as I passed, heads turned, and I caught fragments of whispered commentary. "Is that Rebecca? She looks absolutely stunning. What a gorgeous dress. That's not exactly what I'd call simple." I took my seat in the third row family section, right where my place card indicated I belonged. Aunt Millicent, seated to my left, leaned over with a knowing smile. "Rebecca, dear, you look absolutely radiant. That dress is exquisite. Wherever did you find it?" "Thank you, Aunt Millie. It's actually the same dress I wore to celebrate my divorce." Her eyebrows shot up, and then she began to laugh, a genuine, delighted sound that made several people turn in our direction. "Oh, my dear girl, you are your grandmother's granddaughter. She would have loved this." Before I could respond, the wedding music began, and everyone rose to their feet as Charlotte began her procession down the aisle. Despite everything, despite the complicated emotions and family drama, I found myself genuinely moved as I watched my sister walk toward her future. Charlotte looked absolutely beautiful in her custom Vera Wang gown, a confection of ivory silk and French lace that must have taken months to create. Her face was radiant with joy, and as she looked at James waiting for her at the altar, I could see genuine love in her expression. For a moment, I felt a pang of something that might have been regret. Was I wrong to have chosen today to make my statement? Was I being selfish, attention-seeking, unnecessarily dramatic? But then, Charlotte's eyes found mine as she passed my row, and her expression changed. The radiant joy faltered for just a moment as she took in my appearance, and I saw something flicker across her face that looked suspiciously like anger. The moment passed quickly, and she continued down the aisle to meet her groom. But I knew that look. I had seen it before, usually when Charlotte felt that I was somehow stealing her thunder or drawing attention that rightfully belonged to her. The ceremony proceeded beautifully, with heartfelt vows and just enough tears to be touching without being messy. As James kissed his bride and they turned to face their guests as husband and wife, the crowd erupted in applause and celebration. But I was watching my parents' faces, and I could see the storm gathering behind their carefully maintained smiles. The reception confrontation, the cocktail hour following the ceremony, was a master class in the kind of social dynamics that had shaped my entire childhood. Guests mingled on the terrace overlooking the Sound, champagne flutes in hand, engaging in the carefully choreographed dance of high society conversation. I moved through the crowd with practiced ease, accepting compliments on my appearance and deflecting the more pointed questions about my choice of attire. "Rebecca, you look absolutely stunning," gushed Mrs. Hamilton, one of my mother's bridge club friends. "That dress is gorgeous. It must be new." "Actually, it's one of my favorites. I've worn it to several special occasions." "Well, it's perfect for today. You know, some people might have chosen something more subdued for their sister's wedding, but I think you look wonderful." The passive-aggressive nature of the comment wasn't lost on me, but I simply smiled and thanked her before excusing myself to find the bar. I needed fortification for what I knew was coming. I had just accepted a glass of champagne from one of the servers when I felt a presence behind me. I turned to find my father approaching, his expression carefully neutral, but his jaw tight with barely controlled emotion. "Rebecca!" A word? It wasn't really a question. Harrison Blackwell had perfected the art of making requests sound like orders, and despite everything I'd been through, despite the woman I'd become, some part of me still responded to that authoritative tone like the little girl who had desperately wanted his approval. We walked to a quieter corner of the terrace, away from the main crowd but still within sight of the other guests. My father was too image-conscious to risk a scene, but I could tell he was furious. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" he asked, his voice low but sharp. "I'm attending my sister's wedding and celebrating her happiness." "Don't play games with me, Rebecca. That dress, where have I seen it before?" I took a sip of champagne, using the moment to steady myself. I wore it to my divorce celebration dinner, the night I took back my maiden name and started my new life. His face went through several color changes, settling on a shade of red that suggested his blood pressure was spiking. "You wore your divorce dress to your sister's wedding?" "I wore a beautiful, appropriate, elegant dress to a formal family celebration. The fact that I happened to wear it previously shouldn't matter, unless, of course, you're suggesting that divorced women should somehow mark themselves as such by dressing down permanently. You know damn well that's not what I mean. Your mother specifically asked you to choose something simple, something that wouldn't compete with Charlotte on her special day. And I did choose something appropriate. This dress is tasteful. It covers everything that should be covered, and it's suitable for the level of formality you've established for this event. If you have a problem with it, perhaps you should examine why my looking confident and beautiful threatens you so much." We stared at each other for a long moment, engaged in the kind of power struggle that had defined our relationship for 3 decades. I could see him calculating, trying to decide how far he could push without creating the kind of scene that would become gossip fodder for months. "You're trying to make a point," he said finally. "Some kind of statement about your independence or your divorce or whatever feminist nonsense you've been filling your head with since you left Richard. The only statement I'm making is that I refuse to apologize for existing, for being successful, or for recovering from a marriage that was slowly killing me. If that threatens you, that's your problem, not mine." Before he could respond, Charlotte appeared beside us, still in her wedding gown but with an expression that was far from bridal bliss. "Daddy, could I have a moment alone with Rebecca?" He looked between us, clearly reluctant to leave but unable to refuse the bride on her wedding day. "Of course, sweetheart. Rebecca, we'll continue this conversation later." Oh, after he walked away, Charlotte and I stood in silence for a moment, the sound of celebration and laughter drifting over from the main party. When she finally spoke, her voice was tight with controlled emotion. "Really, Rebecca? Today? You couldn't let me have one day without making it about you?" The accusation hit me like a physical blow, and I felt something crack inside my chest. "Charlotte, this isn't about you. This is about me finally refusing to make myself invisible for everyone else's comfort by wearing your divorce dress to my wedding. Do you have any idea how that looks? How it makes me feel? How does it make you feel, Charlotte? Because I need you to explain to me how my wearing a beautiful, appropriate dress somehow diminishes your happiness or your special day." She stared at me for a moment, and I could see her struggling with an emotion I couldn't quite identify. "It makes me feel like you think my marriage is going to fail too." like you're making some kind of statement about marriage in general or my choices specifically. Her words revealed so much about our family dynamics and the way we'd been trained to interpret everything through the lens of competition and comparison. Charlotte, I don't think your marriage is going to fail. I hope James makes you happy, and I hope you build a wonderful life together. But my wearing this dress has nothing to do with you and everything to do with me refusing to hide who I've become. Who you've become. You mean a bitter divorced woman who can't stand to see other people happy? The cruelty of the comment took my breath away, especially coming from the sister I had protected and supported throughout our childhood. Is that really what you think of me? So for a moment, her expression softened, and I saw a flicker of the little girl who used to seek me out for comfort and advice. But then the mask slipped back into place, and she was once again the golden child defending her territory. I think you've changed since your divorce. I think you've become angry and resentful, and I think you chose today to take it out on our family. Before I could respond, she turned and walked back toward the reception, leaving me standing alone on the terrace with the sound of celebration echoing around me and the taste of champagne turning bitter in my mouth. The truth comes out. I stood alone on the terrace for several minutes after Charlotte left, processing our conversation and trying to decide whether to stay for the reception or quietly leave. The accusation that I had become bitter and resentful stung, particularly because I recognized the grain of truth in it. I had been angry, furious actually, about the way my family treated me, the way they had always treated me. But I wasn't ready to leave yet, not when I could see my mother approaching, with what appeared to be reinforcements in the form of my cousin Jennifer and my Aunt Patricia, Charlotte's godmother. The three women moved across the terrace with the coordinated precision of a military formation, and I realized that Charlotte had sent them to handle the situation. "Rebecca, darling," my mother said, her voice dripping with false sweetness, "we need to talk." "I thought we might," I replied, setting down my champagne glass and turning to face the tribunal that had been assembled to judge me. Aunt Patricia, who had always prided herself on being the family's voice of reason, stepped forward first. "Sweetheart, we all understand that you've been going through a difficult time since your divorce. These transitions can be challenging, and sometimes we make choices that we wouldn't normally make when we're feeling vulnerable." "I'm not feeling vulnerable, Aunt Patricia. I'm feeling empowered." "But wearing that particular dress today," my cousin Jennifer interjected, "surely you can see how it might be interpreted as inappropriate or even hostile." "Hostile," I laughed, and the sound had an edge to it that made all three women take a step back. "I wore a beautiful dress to a formal wedding. If you find that hostile, perhaps you should examine your own attitudes about women who refuse to diminish themselves." My mother's carefully maintained composure finally cracked. "Enough, Rebecca. You're embarrassing yourself and this family. That dress represents the end of your marriage, the failure of your attempts to build a proper life. Wearing it today is like bringing a funeral bouquet to a celebration." "No, Mother. This dress represents my freedom from a marriage that was destroying me, and my refusal to be ashamed of choosing myself over a situation that was making me miserable. If you see that as a failure, that says everything about your values and nothing about mine." The four of us stood there in tense silence, the sound of the reception continuing around us like background music to our family drama. I could see other guests beginning to notice our little gathering, and I knew that by tomorrow, this confrontation would be the subject of gossip throughout our social circle. "You want to know what this dress really represents?" I continued, my voice growing stronger with each word. "It represents the night I realized that I had spent 15 years trying to become someone else's idea of the perfect wife, the perfect daughter, the perfect woman. It represents the moment I decided that My worth wasn't determined by whether I could make myself small enough to fit into everyone else's expectations. Rebecca, my mother began, but I wasn't finished. Do you want to know why I really divorced Richard? Not because he was having an affair, though he was. Not because he was financially controlling, though he was that too. I divorced him because he spent 5 years systematically destroying my confidence, making me doubt my own judgment, convincing me that my thoughts and feelings were wrong or inappropriate or too much. The words were pouring out of me now, 15 years of suppressed truth finally finding its voice. And the worst part is that he learned how to do it by watching our family. He learned that the way to control me was to make me desperate for approval that would never come, to convince me that love was something I had to earn through perfect behavior and constant self-sacrifice. My Aunt Patricia looked genuinely shocked. Rebecca, that's not fair. Your parents love you, do they? I turned to face my mother directly. When was the last time you told me you were proud of me? When was the last time you celebrated one of my achievements without qualifying it with criticism or concern about how it might be perceived? My mother's face had gone pale, and for the first time in my memory, she seemed to be at a loss for words. I graduated summa cum laude from Columbia Law School, and you worried that I was becoming too intellectual to attract a husband. I made partner at one of the city's most prestigious firms, and you suggested that I should consider scaling back my career to focus on starting a family. I won a case that changed employment law for women across the state, and you asked if the publicity might make me seem too aggressive. Jennifer tried to interrupt. Rebecca, I think I'm being honest for the first time in 32 years. I'm telling the truth about what it's like to be the daughter who never quite measures up, who spends her entire life trying to earn love that's always just out of reach. I turned back to my mother, and I could see tears forming in her eyes. For a moment, I felt a flicker of my old instinct to comfort her, to apologize for causing her distress, to make myself smaller so she could feel better. But I didn't. Instead, I stood there in my beautiful dress, feeling more authentically myself than I had in decades, and I finished what I had started. This dress represents the woman I am when I'm not trying to be someone else. It represents strength, confidence, and the radical idea that I deserve to take up space in the world. If you find that threatening or inappropriate, then perhaps you need to examine why a woman owning her power makes you so uncomfortable. The moment of truth and choosing myself. The silence that followed my declaration stretched for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. My mother stood frozen, tears threatening to spill over, while my aunt and cousin exchanged glances that spoke volumes about their discomfort with the emotional honesty I had just unleashed. It was my mother who finally broke the silence, her voice smaller than I had ever heard it. Rebecca, we never meant to make you feel unloved, inadequate, like you were constantly disappointed in who I was. I supplied the words she seemed unable to find. But that's exactly what you did, and you did it consistently for 32 years. We wanted you to be happy, she said, and for the first time I heard something in her voice that might have been genuine regret. We wanted you to have a good life, to make choices that would lead to stability and respect. Whose definition of a good life, Mother? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you wanted me to have the life you thought I should want, not the life that would actually make me happy. Aunt Patricia stepped forward, clearly uncomfortable with the direction the conversation had taken. Perhaps we should continue this discussion privately, away from what? The wedding guests who might overhear us having a real conversation for once? I shook my head. No, I'm done hiding family dysfunction behind closed doors and polite smiles. As if summoned by my words, Charlotte appeared at the edge of our group, her expression wary but curious. She had clearly been watching from a distance, probably debating whether to intervene in what was obviously a significant family moment. "What's going on?" she asked, looking between my mother's tear-stained face and my determined expression. "Your sister is having some kind of breakdown," Jennifer said, apparently deciding that offense was the best defense. "She's been saying terrible things about the family, making wild accusations." "I've been telling the truth," I corrected. "There's a difference." Charlotte looked at me for a long moment, and I could see her processing the scene before her. "What truth?" "The truth about what it's like to be the daughter who never quite measures up. The truth about spending your entire life trying to earn love that's always conditional on being someone other than who you actually are." "That's not," Charlotte began, but I could see something shift in her expression as she spoke. "I mean, it's not the same for everyone." "No, it's not the same for everyone. It's not the same for you, because you're the golden child who can do no wrong. But for me, it's been a lifetime of feeling like I'm not enough, like I need to apologize for existing, like my worth is determined by how well I can disappear into the background." Charlotte was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke again, her voice was thoughtful rather than defensive. "Is that really how you feel, like you have to disappear?" "No, Charlotte, 3 weeks ago, our mother called to tell me to dress simply for your wedding, so I wouldn't take attention away from you. She didn't ask me to avoid wearing white or to choose something appropriate for the venue. She asked me to make myself invisible because my presence as a confident, attractive woman might somehow diminish your special day." I watched Charlotte's face as she processed this information, saw the moment when she began to understand the implications of what I was saying. And instead of disappearing, I chose to show up as myself. I chose to wear a dress that makes me feel beautiful and confident and worthy of respect. If that's threatening to our family, then the problem isn't with me. My mother had been listening to this exchange with growing distress, and she finally found her voice again. "Rebecca, we never wanted you to feel that way. We love you." "Do you?" I asked, and the question hung in the air between us. Because love isn't something you have to earn through perfect behavior. Love isn't conditional on being the right kind of successful or making the right kind of choices or attracting the right kind of husband. "Of course we love you," she said, but there was something uncertain in her voice, as if she was questioning her own words. "Then why do I feel like I've spent my entire life auditioning for your approval? Why do I feel like every conversation we have includes some subtle criticism or suggestion for improvement? Why did it take me 32 years and a devastating divorce to realize that I was worthy of respect and affection exactly as I am?" The question seemed to deflate something in my mother, and she sank down onto a nearby bench as if her legs could no longer support her. I thought we were helping you, preparing you for the world, teaching you how to succeed. You were teaching me that I wasn't good enough as I was. You were teaching me that love was something I had to earn rather than something I deserved simply by existing." Charlotte had been unusually quiet during this exchange, but now she stepped closer to me, her expression troubled. "Rebecca, I had no idea you felt this way. I mean, I knew you and Mom sometimes had issues, but I thought that was just normal family stuff. It probably was normal for you because you were never on the receiving end of it. You were the daughter who could do no wrong, who was naturally charming and socially graceful and destined for a perfect life. I was the daughter who had to work twice as hard for half the recognition. But you were always so successful, so accomplished, and none of it was ever enough. Every achievement came with a qualification. Every success came with suggestions for improvement. I spent 15 years married to a man who continued that pattern, who made me feel like I was too much and not enough at the same time. I looked around at the faces surrounding me. my mother's shocked distress, my aunt's uncomfortable disapproval, my cousin's obvious desire to be anywhere else, and Charlotte's growing understanding. So yes, I wore this dress today. I wore it because it represents the moment I decided to stop apologizing for who I am. I wore it because I'm done making myself smaller for everyone else's comfort. And if that makes you uncomfortable, if that threatens the family dynamic we've maintained for 3 decades, then maybe it's time for that dynamic to change. New beginnings and hard-won freedom. 6 months have passed since Charlotte's wedding, and as I sit in my new apartment overlooking Central Park, I can honestly say that I've never been happier or more at peace with who I am. The confrontation that day was painful, messy, and long overdue, but it was also transformative in ways I couldn't have imagined. The immediate aftermath of the wedding was challenging. My parents barely spoke to me for 2 months, communicating only through Charlotte or in stilted, formal messages about practical matters. Several family friends stopped inviting me to social events, apparently uncertain about how to navigate the new dynamic. My cousin Jennifer spread rumors throughout our social circle about my breakdown at the wedding, painting me as an unstable divorced woman who couldn't handle her sister's happiness. But something unexpected happened in the weeks following that day. Charlotte called me. We met for coffee at a small cafe in the village, far from our usual Upper East Side haunts, and for the first time in our adult lives, we had a real conversation. She told me that my words at the wedding had forced her to examine her own relationship with our parents, her own understanding of love and approval and family dynamics. "I never realized," she said, stirring her latte absently, "how different our experiences were growing up. I mean, I knew you and Mom sometimes clashed, but I thought that was just because you were more, I don't know, more challenging, more independent, more likely to push back. I thought the criticism was because you needed more guidance, not because they treated us fundamentally differently. It was the beginning of a new relationship between us, one built on honesty rather than the careful performance we'd both been taught to maintain." Charlotte admitted that she had always felt pressure to be perfect, to be the golden child who made up for my perceived failures. The burden of being the easy daughter had been its own kind of prison. 3 months after the wedding, our parents requested a family meeting. We gathered in their Upper East Side apartment, the same formal living room where I had been lectured about appropriate behavior countless times throughout my childhood. But this time was different. My mother had been seeing a therapist, she told us. The confrontation at the wedding had forced her to examine her own parenting, her own childhood experiences, the ways she had unconsciously perpetuated patterns of conditional love that she had experienced herself. "I never wanted you to feel unloved," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I thought I was preparing you for a difficult world, teaching you how to succeed in a society that judges women harshly. But you were teaching me that I wasn't acceptable as I was," I replied. "You were teaching me that love was something I had to earn through perfect behavior." The conversation lasted 3 hours and involved more honest emotion than our family had expressed in 3 decades. My father, who had always been the more distant parent, admitted that he had never known how to relate to me, how to support a daughter who was ambitious and independent in ways that his generation hadn't prepared him for. We didn't fix 32 years of dysfunction in one afternoon, but we made a beginning. My parents are still learning how to express unconditional love, still catching themselves when they slip into old patterns of criticism disguised as concern. But they're trying, and that effort means more to me than I can express. My professional life has flourished since I stopped trying to meet everyone else's expectations. The boutique firm where I work has promoted me to senior partner, and I've been selected to argue a major case before the Supreme Court next year. I'm dating again. A kind, intelligent man who appreciates my strength rather than trying to diminish it. He's a professor of literature at Columbia, and he finds my intensity engaging rather than threatening. Most importantly, I've learned to trust my own judgment, to value my own opinion, to take up space in the world without apologizing. The woman who wore that blue dress to her sister's wedding was making a statement not just to her family, but to herself. I am worthy of respect, I deserve to be seen, and I will not make myself smaller for anyone else's comfort. Last week, Charlotte called to tell me she's pregnant with her first child. As we talked about names and nursery decorations and her hopes for motherhood, she said something that brought tears to my eyes. I want to do better than Mom did with us, she said. I want my child to know they're loved unconditionally, that they don't have to earn my approval by being someone other than who they are. They're lucky to have you as their mother, I told her, and I meant it. They're lucky to have you as their aunt, too. I want them to see what it looks like to be strong and independent and unapologetically yourself. As I hung up the phone that day, I thought about the blue dress hanging in my closet, about the woman who chose to wear it to a family wedding 6 months ago. She was brave in a way I'm still learning to be, honest in a way that changed everything, powerful in a way that threatened people who were invested in her being small. I think about her often, that woman who decided that one moment of authentic truth was worth risking everything she had been taught to value. She gave me the life I'm living now, the relationships I'm building, the peace I've found with who I am. If you're struggling with similar family dynamics, if you're tired of making yourself smaller for everyone else's comfort, if you're ready to take up space in the world without apologizing, I want you to know that it's possible. It's scary, it's difficult, and it might cost you relationships that weren't as solid as you thought they were. But the freedom you'll gain is worth every difficult conversation, every uncomfortable moment, every relationship that doesn't survive your decision to be authentically yourself. Sometimes, the most radical thing you can do is simply show up as who you really are. Sometimes a dress is just a dress, and sometimes it's a declaration of war against every force that has tried to make you smaller than you were meant to be. I chose to fight that war, and I won. Not because I destroyed my family or burned bridges or sought revenge, but because I refused to disappear. I refused to apologize for being successful, confident, beautiful, and free. And that refusal changed everything. What will you refuse to apologize for? What battle will you choose to fight? What version of yourself are you ready to show the world? I hope you'll share your stories in the comments below. I hope you'll hit that like button if this resonated with you. And I hope you'll subscribe to follow more stories of women who chose themselves, who found their strength, who learned that they were worthy of love and respect exactly as they were. The blue dress still hangs in my closet, and I still wear it to celebrate the most important moments in my life, because it will always remind me of the day I decided to stop auditioning for other people's approval and started living for my own. That decision saved my life, and it can save yours too.